Hello and a warm welcome to a new video. Today we're taking a look at silver mining stocks and of course silver itself. We're seeing some very exciting price movements. After a significant correction phase, silver is once again on the rise. The question is, will we reach new all-time highs? How high could silver climb by 2026 with price targets of $300 that seem outlandish or perhaps even realistic? We'll take a look at that in the video right now. So before we begin, please note this risk disclaimer. Everything I state does not constitute a buy or sell recommendation, nor is it financial advice, but solely my personal opinion. So let's just dive right into it now and take a look at the silver chart. Because silver, after that big sell-off I just mentioned, has recovered quite well, and the question is, of course, when we consider this big picture, this is the logarithmic chart, we actually see it's already very parabolic, and anyone who's been in the stock market for a while knows that these parabolic movements can sometimes collapse quite violently. When that will actually happen, or even if it will, that is of course the big question, and I don't think anyone can really give a precise answer to that, or rather it's something that cannot yet be foreseen at this current moment. If we take a look at the chart, both the weekly and the daily chart, then we are actually just about to continue this upward trend once again. So from a chart perspective, we are above the moving averages. Yes, so the short-term price target we should be aiming for would again be $120. And then the question naturally is, can we achieve a new all-time high? That will, of course, also depend a bit on the new situation. Currently, with the Iran conflict, we have a re-emerging problem, which is fundamentally bullish for gold and silver. Therefore, it would not surprise me at all if we, with silver still in the relatively near future, then see the $120 mark here. That's where it gets interesting. Can we manage to get above that, or will we see another heavy sell-off? Because then there could certainly be a risk that we form a kind of double top here, right? Meaning that we form a double top here, which could certainly indicate a trend reversal. I did mention in my last video that if we just take a moment to observe the historical progression here of silver, and particularly when we consider these parabolic movements, then we saw both at this point and then again in 2011 a very significant pullback of 30%, all occurring within just one single week. And we had almost seen this very thing unfold here in just one single day. And back then, that was precisely the end of the bull market. However, when I take a closer look at this situation, at least for the time being, it still appears to be extremely bullish. And if we now manage to push beyond that point, surpassing the $120 mark and establishing a brand new all-time high, then it is quite conceivable that we could witness here once again for several, yes, weeks or even months, the continuation of this upward trend into a full-fledged bull market. The Bank of America has now really come out with a very stunning price target, and I was pretty amazed when I read that, because it predicts that by 2026 or by the end of 2026, we will be somewhere between $135 and $309 based on the gold-silver ratio analysis. So it's already very interesting to observe that here the Bank of America is predicting such a, well, one could certainly call it a truly massive price target. And consequently, I would also say at this point, the market in general is very bullish. And accordingly, I'm quite eager to see what happens next. And that naturally also affects silver mining stocks, which are truly earning splendidly at the current level. They're just going up and up. First Majestic Silver is, of course, one of them. We'll also see that in the fundamental figures shortly. First Majestic has now reached a new all-time high, which also indicates a new buy signal from a technical chart perspective. And it's clear it moves in parallel with the silver price, but it also really shows how much money these companies are currently earning. And especially First Majestic, who in recent years, if we just look at their free cash flow, for example, have really just been struggling along, haven't achieved much at all, and now suddenly have an exploding free cash flow. So we've barely generated any free cash flow at Freeport, First Majestic, and now suddenly in one quarter, 260 million. And that will continue because the margins are extremely good. Yes, we now have margins of 50%, and if silver continues to hold at such a high average, then they will partly rise even further. And I think the net profit margin here definitely has the potential to be raised even further. That is all very good. Clearly, the valuation is indeed extremely high, but one must not underestimate the fact that this valuation will naturally come down over time, precisely because these revenues are increasing so significantly. This implies that silver mining stocks, especially if silver maintains its position up there at approximately $100, these companies will undoubtedly continue to generate substantial profits. And if we take a look at the all-in sustaining costs, which are essentially the production costs, then we can see that we are, in essence, if we were to summarize it, on average, significantly below $20. Coeur Mining stands out a little bit, but let's just put it at $20, and we currently have a silver price of $90. Then anyone can easily calculate what truly insane gross margins those fundamentally are, and which will only become apparent in the coming quarters, especially in the next quarterly results. This means I actually anticipate gross margins will continue to rise, trending upwards, and free cash flow will also keep increasing. The cash reserves that are accumulating on the balance sheets, as you can clearly see below, these will also be significantly boosted. We will see special dividends, yes, with silver mining stocks. The dividend yields aren't always that noteworthy, I'd say, but those will also be raised substantially. I'm curious to see. In the next video, we'll take a more concrete look at the dividends. Let's take a closer look at the individual stocks right now, and there we actually don't see any major differences. Well, a little bit, yes, there are some, especially Pan American, or rather First Majestic the other way around. I actually don't like as much because they had such a poor gross margin here in contrast to Pan American. Pan American is top here with a gross margin of over 30%, and that's what you generally see in the market. Yes, gross margin also around 50%. Yes, this entire fundamental picture, all the fundamental key figures essentially look quite similar. Pan American, interestingly, is still valued a bit cheaper by its price to sales ratio at 8 and a PE of 26. I just have to check what First Majestic, yeah, they didn't have such high profits, which is why their PE ratio is significantly higher. But since profitability here is now continuing to rise with the average silver price being so high, I believe we still tend to have a rather favorable valuation here. And of course, in recent months, it's been a bit hard to gauge clearly, because we just didn't know where the silver price would end up, but it seems it will settle somewhere around $900 to $1,000, at least if we don't reach a new all-time high. And yes, that's why the current valuation of silver mining stocks should, of course, be quite justified. I believe that the safety net or perhaps the downside potential is rather limited, and the upside potential is naturally quite significant, particularly if we witness new all-time highs for silver. And accordingly, you can... For now, as I said, no investment advice, but if you own them, you can let them sit for a while and observe the market. Let's move to the next stock. That's Hecla Mining. Hecla Mining is also interesting, especially politically. One is very active in the US and is also supported there. And we're essentially seeing the exact same gross margin. So I don't think we need to go into much detail on that. Yeah, you can already see that just from the chart here. The valuation is also relatively high right now, especially when compared to other stocks, yes. Here we're looking at a price to sales ratio already hovering around 12, yes. In contrast, Pan American Silver is a bit more affordably priced. So if you're looking to make some selections or perhaps reallocate your portfolio a bit, this could certainly be a key criterion for choosing your stocks based on their current valuation, yes. Which one is relatively a bit cheaper and which one is relatively a bit more expensive. And if we also take a look at Hecla Mining here, then we see this downtrend that we've been following for years has really exploded upwards in an extremely bullish way. You simply can't say it any other way. Right. Let's take a look at the next stock now. We'll quickly go through this and then look at Fresnillo. Fresnillo, on there, we also see a stable upward trend. Its price to sales ratio here is 10. This means it's similarly valued like the other stocks, like its peer group. On average, the same applies because unfortunately here in trading, we just don't have the fundamental key figures. But I think that there aren't any major differences. The dividend yield here is actually a bit more interesting compared to the other stocks, but not by much at 0.8. Yeah. Gold mining stocks tend to be better there as well. Silvercorp Metals also here a free cash flow explosion. That's already good. Net profit margin still needs to prove itself a bit, but the gross profit margin is really very, very decent at 60%. This means they are already top tier. We also saw this with the all-in sustaining costs, which are exceptionally low. The price to sales ratios are also relatively moderate, comparatively speaking, at 8 compared to other companies that are more around 10 and 12. We still have quite a bit of potential here for the stock to catch up if other stocks have already performed too well. And that's why I actually consider this one of the more exciting stocks. So let's take a look at Coeur Mining. Coeur Mining also shows exactly the same picture. Here, the valuation is actually still quite moderate, similar to Silvercorp Metals, even though they have a somewhat higher all-in sustaining cost here. But fundamentally, I think it's a very sound company. It also made several acquisitions in recent times. This drives prices, production costs up a bit, at least in the short term. But here too, everything primarily depends on the silver market, the silver price and its direction. And Coeur Mining is certainly still a top stock, though it doesn't pay a dividend. So that's all from my side. I hope you enjoyed this video. A brief update on silver mining shares and the silver price. I'm interested to see how it unfolds, and as I mentioned, the $120 mark will be very interesting should silver reach that point, to check if we can potentially hit new all-time highs, or if we should perhaps consider that we might see a trend reversal. I'm really looking forward to it. I hope we'll see each other in one of the upcoming videos, and thanks to all the channel members for your continued support. Until we meet again, all the best and much success, and goodbye.